gentlemen and ladies of the press, I welcome you to this press conference on the emergency won by the Lower Niger Congress, a State of the Union kind of address. The country has just been plunging on and on into what might be an irreversible situation. The foundations of the country threatened by these great anomalies. And the purpose of this emergency press conference, which we tag State of the Union, is to alert the global community and Nigerians, of course, who are in the fire of it, of developments, interpret some of the things that are happening so that there could be a better appreciation both by those who are the receiving end of it and the government that seems to have no care at all about the consequences of some of the things it does. And therefore, the first is to raise an urgent alarm about the collapse of the rule of law in Nigeria. We'll all recall that on the 30th of December 2015, when the President, Muhammadu Buhari, had his media briefing or media chat, he faced the cameras and told the whole world that he will not pay any heed to what the Constitution says or what the judges say in respect of human rights that were, being abused. Bails have been granted to citizens who were accused of one infraction or the other. We had the former NSA, Dasuki. We had the Nnamdi Kanu of IPOB. And the interviewers were asking the president why the court orders, that are based on constitutional provisions will not be obeyed. And the president simply said it will not happen under his watch, that because the judge said the people will. The message that the international community took away from that answer from the president at the time was that the rule of law had been suspended in Nigeria. If the constitution can no longer come to the aid of the citizen, and the courts can no longer come to the aid of the citizen, it means that all the other talk about the rule of law is just, it goes to no issue. And proceeding from there, of course, we've seen the drama, the extension of the drama. It first went to the legislative branch, and the heads of the two chambers were being dragged around for one thing or the other. Of course, it has now gone to the judiciary, in which justices of the Supreme Court and the other judges of the Federal High Court have been grabbed and dragged around. Yes, there is the talk of corruption that has become the omnibus, the Clapperman's omnibus for driving all kinds of things that have nothing to do with fighting corruption. If we want to talk about fighting corruption and we refuse to define what that corruption really means, because if you have a tap that is running in a place and you choose to go and mop instead of turning off the tap, the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and I have a copy here, is the creator of all of what we call corruption now, and is the protector of the beneficiaries of the corruption. Those who drew up this Constitution consciously created avenues to take all of the contents of the Treasury into the hands of the heads of the executive branch, who of course then have to share with the legislative and the civil servants in between. Because it is only in that kind of, in the kind of provisions we find inside this Constitution that you will have the contents of the Treasury at the discretionary disposal of those who are supposed to be dispensing the benefits of democracy to the people. The governors, the president, the appropriation provisions leave the entire content of the Treasury in their hands to account only when they leave office, because there's also immunity provisions that prevent us from inquiring into what they are doing while they're in office. And by the time you take it again to the provision of section 6, subsection 6C, which render non-justiciable the entire chapter 2 that provides for all the good things of life for the citizen. You know, the conclusion is that the government does not, under this constitution, does not owe the citizen any obligation, and the contents of the Treasury is at the discretionary disposal of those who are in government house, and you cannot call them to account for anything. Between the three, corruption sits in the impregnable fortress of the Constitution. And if those who are now jumping all over the place, pointing at one new discovery or the other, refuse to accept that the Constitution that creates it and protects it should be jettisoned or, you know, turned into what other countries have to prevent the occurrence of these kind of situations that we now call corruption. In the interpretation of what I've said so far is that under this Constitution, corruption is official, but we are thinking that officials are corrupt. There are two different things. Since the Constitution creates and protects all of what we call corruption, it means that corruption is official. And when you take a look around, you discover that the whole business of going to government had been a matter of going to share national cake. And since there's nothing the Constitution can compel in favor of those who are supposed to be getting the benefits of all of that in terms of the government, of course it becomes the exclusive business of those in government house, what they do with the contents of the Treasury. Having said that, we also look at the question of impunity that we are complaining about. The Constitution in section 6, subsection 6D, creates a 33-year period that dates from 15th of January 1966 to the 29th of May 1999, in which all of the acts, you know, undertaken in the name of government, whether it is looting or killing, whatever evil, you know, is put beyond the reach of the judiciary for inquiry. That is to say, a blanket immunity for all the evils conducted in those 33 years. And you find a situation that is the foundation of the impunity we complain about, and which people go about now saying there is corruption, there is impunity. With that provision in place, those who took all of what belonged to Nigeria in that period, killing whoever they chose to kill, still sitting on the proceeds of the abuses in terms of huge, humongous sums and assets, were now the ones who had to dictate who had to be president, who had to be senator, who had to be governor in the transition that followed in 1999. And they found a way to put in the Constitution in section 308 the immunity, that immunity clause that prevents you from going to question those they put in the government house. And most of them, of course, who were part of the benefits of those 33 years that cannot be inquired into, are also the governors and the senators, and we could call names. And where that takes us is that, again, impunity is a creation of this Constitution, and everything we say we want to do to arrest impunity will be a waste of time, except we go back to accepting that we have to turn off the tap. We go from there to the economic situation that has come upon the land. Some call it recession. Yesterday they were in Abuja talking about national economic whatever calls it. They say it's worse than stagflation. That's the recession. They're just calling it recession. The economy, whatever it could be called, because I don't believe there's any economy of Nigeria. It's just a matter of selling crude oil and sharing the money among stakeholders. But if we could call it an economy, the economy has collapsed. And that the economic problems, what the Lower Niger Congress is telling the whole world today is that especially the stakeholders, especially those whose businesses are collapsing, especially those who are watching the naira, on a free fall. The economic problems facing the country today have political roots, and there's no economic team that are going to set up that's going to address the matter better than going back to where the problem is flowing from. What are those political roots? It started with Avengers and all of what they were blowing up. Quantities of crude oil prices that were already down, now being downgraded further, and there was no dollar to back up an import-dependent economy like Nigeria's. And then the naira had been in the front line of the fire. And we have gone from less than 200 naira to $1, approaching 500 naira to $1 today. And between the Avenger and all of the other things that now went, there has been a vendetta pursuit. Instead of trying to manage, the country was already fractured before we went into election. The Lower Niger Congress had gone around telling everybody in all the 2013, 2014, 2015, to say the country should avoid that election that was slated for 2015, so that we will go to the foundations and address the things that will collapse the union if we fail to address them. But the politicians will not listen. And we had made it clear that from what we were seeing, and these were empirical things everybody could see, that if the election of 2015 was conducted with this constitution still in place, whoever won the election, whether it was the APC or the PDP, will not find any Nigeria to govern because of the fault lines that had come to the fore in course of the preparations towards the election. This position of the Lower Niger Congress had been made public since after 2011 elections, when the country almost collapsed on account of the outcomes. And we did all of what we could to remind everybody of 1965, in which the constitution had developed an internal problem in 1962, wobbled on to what became the Wild Wild West in 64, then elections that followed in 1964 and the one of federal in 65. The politicians did not listen. They went to the 1965 election and the country collapsed on their head. We got to that same bus stop in 2015. They went on with that election, and the outcome had been such that there is no Nigeria really to govern by the winner. And where has that landed us? The people who are supposed to be, minding the affairs of 170 million people are busy, putting out, for every one fire they try to put out, there's 3 more to be put out, because one thing is leading to the other. The matter of what to do. Yes, corruption, like we said, is a toxic, addition to any situation, and it has eaten into every part of what could be called the fabric of Nigeria. But if we refuse to go to, like doctors would do, to diagnose what is responsible for this ailment that is about to kill us, and we just insist on tackling the symptoms and manifestations in various forms, of course we are going to be in that because we are acting in misdiagnosis. Some think you have to strengthen the police, some think you have to be more brutal in the ones you catch, whereas the tap from which is all flowing is intact, and the people who ought to be agreeing with us to go and turn off the tap are the ones adamantly opposed to any kind of adjustments to this apartheid-like constitution. And we go from there to the matter of the security, and in all of this, the foundations of the country is being threatened day and night. The Lower Niger Congress, for instance, of which I am Secretary General, is telling the country today that from the eastern part of the country, there's an interpretation going on in very low places. People are reading what is happening in their own, perceptions, and you cannot ask them not to think. The first time may be coincident, the second time coincident, but when it becomes repetitive and recurrent, they are entitled to make their own deductions. What the Lower Niger people the ones you now call South-South and Southeast. I don't know what South-South means. I don't know what Southeast means. We're talking about the people of the part of Nigeria that fall in the eastern half of southern Nigeria. What we see and from which perspective we are addressing the situation, both as it affects the country Nigeria and as it affects our people and as it affects the other people from the other parts of the country, is simply that there seems to be a gang-up. There seems to be a determined orchestration against the territory. And it is within this context that we will want to point out that when the president came in and the security people started talking about pursuing Tompolo that had done this and that, your hero, my villain. Your villain, my hero. Everybody who knew what could come, had raised the lamp to say, Mr. President, there are many more things to pursue, to worry about. Leave this matter alone. Oh, the Niger Delta University has to be shut down because some transaction around it wasn't. People who thought that if everything failed in terms of having lost out in the power game that they had to play among themselves, that these are the legacy things that could help address the complaints of the region. Oh, the first order of business was to shut down that university from taking off. The next thing was to go look for Tompolo wherever they can. Before you knew it, we saw Avengers coming to town. Perhaps it was avoidable, but now here we have it. It hasn't stopped. There have been one hounding after the other for a President Jonathan that surprised even the winner of the election in the manner he handed power to them at the time they declared the result, declared from the elections. For that same president, which the global community, is holding up as an example for Africa, to be, in a situation where it's being constantly rubbished by the same administration, which, again, always admits that he did a few things. The elections have passed. All the propaganda and lies have passed. This is the time to govern. We're almost a year and a half into the governing. But all that has happened is hounding upon hounding. It has now degenerated to the point where the wife of the president, who did not hold any office, I'm talking about what the people of the region are seeing, what the people of the region are saying. And we're talking about young people. You go to newspaper stands, you go to where they gather, you go to schools, wherever, on the streets, in motorparks. The way they are looking at the whole thing is that whatever it is that they say these ones from their own part of the country had done, they have, for everyone, there are 10 examples of worse things that have been done by other people they know who are still parading very free. It has come to where the wife of the president, former president, is being hounded like a common criminal, and all kinds of things being orchestrated to make it look like she's the biggest thief that had come to town. Let us look back and see the other first ladies before her who are still alive and well, and all the kinds of monies that have been spent by them. And we cannot say for sure that it is not part of that hounding that has been going on. And the reason I dwell on this point, not in support of corruption, not in support of any wrongdoing, is that we again hear from the same critics, people who are saying that if this continues beyond what it is, that they are going to carry the fight beyond the creeks to other parts of the country, so that everybody can see what it feels like to be haunted and destabilized, or to be attacked for no reason. It is avoidable we need not drag the matter beyond where it is now if we are still thinking of salvaging any union of Nigeria. Because in all of these things, Nigeria has been dancing around the brink for some time, but I wonder how it's going to recover from this current round of dance. we now come to the matter of what do we begin to do? Because it is one thing to complain. I saw the Nigerian Bar Association shouting the other day, but this was the same bar association we have been trying for many years to get to agree with us that the problem Nigeria has, which has to be solved if we want to solve, is the constitutional arrangement that is producing, just like the apartheid constitution of South Africa. There's no difference. That people are saying that they have been corralled into a federation against their will. There were discussions before independence for how we will relate. It was that 3 countries coming together to federate, because that a federation is a union of constitutions. Now the soldiers came in 1966 and toppled all of it. And from that point on, we've been on unitarism. 36 states have emerged. 774 local government areas have been met, all embedded in this constitution. And it was all done because there was some oil money to share. The oil is gone now. And we're saying, what do we do? Is it to cut down on small bits of salaries that were already 50 times what they should be, from senators and house members or governors giving up one more pair of shoes? That will not solve the problem. Nigeria must wake up to realizing that the 36 state structure is not sustainable. The 774 local government area is not sustainable. And the matter of 68 items on the exclusive list of the constitution, which makes it impossible for the federating units to do the basic things governance does. Assets have been seized by the center just because somebody was in a position to make a decrease. And therefore, the diagnosis of what is killing Nigeria right now is the fraudulent unitary constitutional order. Every other step taken to try to solve any of this problem will fail. And if we waste any more time on it, the country itself will collapse, because what is going on now is making the various blocs think aloud on what their future should be, especially in the face of the Sharia that have been imposed in 12 contiguous states of the far north, in which people, some owe it a duty, the adherents of that faith owe it a duty to their faith to kill the infidel. And the rest of the country is now asking, at what point will that definition of infidel change? It simply means that those who impose Sharia in those 12 far northern states, had seceded from the union, because the constitution, as bad as it is, also says that there can be no state religion in section 10. And if it has come to where a state religion has been imposed in a manner that excludes people from some parts of the country from functioning freely in that part that has Sharia, of course the union is being made impossible, has been made impossible, except something gives way today. That is on the one side. On the other is that all of the question of security, the question of infrastructure, because that is where you go to the exclusive list, the question of corruption, the question of all of what has gone wrong with the land. What we must do now, and if we fail to do, we're going to pay a high price that will include the collapse of the Federation of Nigeria, is that we look in the direction of South Africa and how it came out from its apartheid constitution that had exactly the same problems as this constitution had, because it was imposed and seized the assets and the rights of the owners of the land for almost 80 years. But there came in 1990 a Frederick de Klerk, having been elected under that apartheid constitution, who saw that the society he was presiding over was collapsing and was going to collapse to the final if that apartheid was not removed. And what did he do? He didn't go setting up economic committee to go and bring water out from the stone. He didn't go killing everybody who protested what the apartheid was doing in their own place. Of course, they had people in detention, Mandela and co. But the important thing he did that became the turning point for South Africa in the time their constitution was going to collapse them was that he made an announcement to say that the apartheid constitutional order will have to be renegotiated and dispensed with. He set up a framework that they call Codesha. It took them 5 years from the time they started in 1990 to when they rounded up in 1994 with a referendum and an election, the election that brought Nelson Mandela and his ANC to power. We are saying today that Nigeria collapse if the managers of Nigeria do not accept that we have to go from this evil constitutional arrangement to a negotiated one. And it takes only one announcement from those who are, maybe the president or whoever can speak on his behalf, to say that we will now have to go to do that. It's been called restructuring. It's been called the demand for federalism or regional autonomy. They are all saying the same thing. And all the agitations in the land are manifestations of the same constitutional grievances covered by these articulations. And therefore we say, if we want to salvage anything at all, it is to accept that we must now go to doing that restructuring. The transitional arrangements that we see to day-to-day governance while the discussions are taking place, of course, can easily be put in place. But the starting point is to accept that unitarianism has failed and that it will consume the union of Nigeria if we do not revert back to a federation that we are supposed to be. Thank you.